also working on all the commercial market access strategies related to its portfolio. So welcome, Mr. Yang.
Thank you.
Hi. So next year we have Dr. Viviana Munoz Teles. So she is the coordinator of the Development, Innovation, and Intellectual Property Program at the South Center. So she also holds a doctorate degree on Management of Technology from the École Polytechnique of Lausanne in Switzerland, and a master's degree in Development Management from the London School of Economics. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Hi. And so we're actually also waiting for another panelist, which is Mr. Stanley Nandasaba. So if he joins us later, I'm just going to give a very brief introduction of who he is. So he's a final year Bachelor of Pharmacy student, and he's also the co-founder of Students Against Superbugs in Africa, as well as a global health enthusiast. So welcome, Art. Here today, we're very happy. This is definitely a very interesting topic that we all want to know, because it's just so different in many countries, and we really want to hear from you all. So when we start, I do want to ask some questions. So my first question will be, so what are some of the challenges around access to antimicrobials that all the participants here should be familiar with?
Should I start, or there is a specific request from someone start? Because I can start if you want.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. No, yes, I would say in terms of access, appropriate access and stewardship, in fact, are two faces in the same coin if we want to achieve a sustainable access to antibiotics. And when we are doing some plan for antibiotics, we should always take into consideration access and stewardship. Regarding access, of course, there is all the question around developing a strong pipeline of product in order to have some product in development, which is one, I would say, the first point. And here we have a lot of push initiative, and the EMR Action Fund developed this year will tackle this point. But nevertheless, we need to keep in mind that antimicrobial resistance is an emerging pandemic of drug-resistant infection. And antibiotics are really critical component of pandemic preparedness. And we need to invest in antimicrobial resistant tools in order to achieve this issue, I would say, to find a way to tackle this issue. And if I'm looking at access, well, in fact, there is a lot of different questions in terms of access. There is a question around regulatory aspect, how to be sure that all the product will be available everywhere. If we are looking at, I would say, regarding the 25 new antibiotics developed between 1999 and 2014, only 12 were registered in more than 10 countries, which is not a lot. So we have here a big issue in terms of how to accelerate access. But also you have some issue in terms of cost of good, affordability of the product, because when we are discussing about antibiotic, you have in mind old antibiotic, which are cheap product, but also new antibiotics, which are 20 more expensive products. So how to, I would say, tackle this kind of issue in terms of affordability. But also you have two other concerns around acceptability linked to policies and positioning, just to ensure the awareness of the product to be listed in the tender at the hospital level. So here, how to do it. And the last one is regarding availability of the product. So means how to manage all the access chain, supply chain regarding the product, because, well, you have a lot of different questions here around how to assess the demand at the local level, how to make the demand, how to make the link between the demand and the supply, how to develop some long-term agreements with supplier, how to ensure distribution at the hospital or at the community-based, how to do the storage and the education. And you have, of course, this kind of issue for, I would say, classical medicinal product. But here, linked to antibiotic, we know that there is product with a small market, maybe sometimes no market, no financial interest for all the private players to work in such area. So that's why we need to find and to develop some new innovative mechanism in order to be sure that this product will be available. So I will stop here, because if not, I can discuss for 1 hour about this topic. But that's all the different concerns that we have in terms of access. Over.
Yeah, thank you so much for explaining all those concepts. I'm definitely sure that like having to distribute like from the government to like all the hospital, get to all areas is definitely a big problem. So maybe now next we can have Miss Michelle to share a little bit more about the challenges too.
Thank you. Well, from my academic background and working experience across Latin America, there are three main challenges around access to antimicrobials we must be familiar with. First, the public health sector challenge. We must consolidate robust and efficient public health system to ensure access to antimicrobials for the most of the vulnerable patients in low middle income countries. This is a strategic challenge involving key stakeholders in both public and private spheres. Second, the challenge of incorporating technology and innovation to supply chain in private and public organizations. This is more like a tactical and operational challenge. In this respect, we should encourage and support more multidisciplinary applied research projects that allow us to find better and more scalable solutions for improving antimicrobial accessibility. Finally, and probably the most important one, the challenge of collaboration between countries. In my view, we must address the antimicrobial accessibility issues from a global perspective. This is not an issue that countries, at least low middle income countries, can solve for their own. Most of these countries do not have the resources, know-how, and technology available for solving it. Therefore, we should, through global organizations, public policies, cross-collaborative research projects, and private alliances, address the antimicrobial accessibility challenge from a collaborative approach.
Yeah, I totally agree how it definitely involves a lot of stakeholders other than just like the health system. From the policy side, technology is definitely a thing that we have to focus and then to make sure that everyone has the technology to do it and have the resources. How about we have Dr. Viviana to also share about like some challenges that you can think of like you have faced in the country.
Hi, Audrey. Thank you. And thanks for this invitation. It's great to be speaking to all this wonderful group of young people and just to congratulate you all for being also very cross-sectoral in this discussion, which is something we also need for the issues of access. So I work with an intergovernmental organization of developing countries. So access is one of the core issues that we look at within the whole scope of the urgent response that is needed against antimicrobial resistance. So definitely applaud you for looking at the issue of access as a core issue as part of the solutions within the scope of what is needed in AMR. And so just as you spread the word on the problem of antibiotic resistance and overall antimicrobial resistance, it's important to spread the word on the problem of access as well as you're doing now. So again, I think I'd highlight what Jan already said, just to echo that the problem is really the unnecessary and inappropriate consumption, for example, for human health of antibiotics, or inappropriate or necessary use also for animal health. So we're not talking specifically that having access is per se the problem. The issue is then, how are these being used? And when we talk about access, it's important to note it's part of a human right to health. And we're really talking about ensuring that we can make these interventions available and accessible to those when they need them. So that's the general concept that we have to bear in mind. So how do we get not only antimicrobials, but also diagnostics, which are really important to ensure that we decrease the use of antibiotics when not really necessary? I mean, sometimes in many parts of the world, it's very difficult to really have sufficient proper healthcare to identify when the antibiotic really is needed for an infection. And perhaps when it might be a viral infection, if you're a parent or if you're very much concerned about the health of your animal, you might just decide that this is the way to go, even just as a preventive measure when not necessarily useful. So we also have to be context specific and understand that we're not looking at the global problem, as a one single problem effect. We really have to break it down of what's happening at the country level. And in that way, when we talk about global solidarity, also, as Michelle was mentioning about the importance of looking at supportive measures, really to think about how do we also help countries in their own national action plans insert the issue of access as one core one, just as we're looking at improving surveillance, data collection, and monitoring for identifying resistance consumption levels, we should also be doing that for access. So just on that point, I'd like to highlight that, the effort that WHO has done on the health side for identifying through the aware classification of which antibiotics should be left for reserve use versus being widely available. I think that's a good step forward, and it'd be useful to see more countries incorporating the aware framework also in their national action plans for the public health perspective. And then finally, just as we'll be discussing other points, I just highlight at this moment that, one thing Jan mentioned on the issue of the existing antibiotics, how do we preserve them? That's one part of access. So we do have antibiotics where the problem is not really perhaps the price, in terms that these are many of them generics. So there can be some issues of affordability, but it's more through the supply chain of how these are made available, not necessarily questions, for example, of intellectual property or of affordability in terms of high price. But then we also have the separate issue of how to ensure then that we don't have these shortages that are going in large parts of the world, even in developed countries. So there we have flaws in the system, and we need to fix those for existing antibiotics and to ensure we can deal with shortages. And then we have, on the other hand, the dearth of innovation, which leads also to the question that as we think about innovation models for antibiotics and other antimicrobials, we also need to have access present as a core issue since the beginning. So for example, with the target product profiles, and not just wait for innovations to come out and then deal with the problems, as Jan was mentioning, for example, that we have of the new products, which many of them are not really targeting those critical areas of antibiotic innovation that we need, that we see very few countries where these are registered. So access has to be part of that innovation equation for new antibiotics also since the beginning. And I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up a lot of the very important points about how sometimes it's not just only about the lack of access. Sometimes it's like we're using too many, that there's like actually it's like we're misusing it. So I'm wondering, so going about that line, I kind of want to ask about, so what are some of the measures that you think can be taken to regulate the distribution of the antibiotics to avoid the misuse? Because I know that in some countries there are no like prescriptions, so people can just go to like a local pharmacy and buy that antibiotics. So it is so hard to like control it. And I'm wondering what else you all think about that. Maybe you can have Mr. Jan to start.
Okay, if you want, and just to come back to what said Viviana regarding what we are developing within GARDP, just maybe regarding GARDP. GARDP is a global antibiotic research and development partnership. It's a non-for-profit organization, research and development organization, creating 2016 with WHO, and we are essential to delivering on the global action plan on antimicrobial resistance. But since I would say now a few months, we are mainly working on, we are also working on the access part, and we try to develop with WHO a new mechanism, a new initiative in order to accelerate the access of essential antibiotics. Because, well, we know that many countries do not have access to essential antibiotics to fight drug-resistant infection for different reasons. We're getting old antibiotic for shortage one, as Viviana said, or getting new because it's a pure market failure. So we need to find a new mechanism to do that. And so we are working with, as I say, WHO, but also UNICEF and other partners, whether in order to develop this concept, to develop this project, in order to be able to launch something in the coming years, in order to facilitate the access of essential antibiotics. But well, even if you facilitate the access, one of the key questions is, well, how to be sure that this antibiotic will be used in an appropriate way at the local level. So that's all the question around policy. So the aware classification done by WHO is, I would say, a good point. Everything linked to diagnostic, yes, being able to develop also some diagnostic tools linked to the antibiotic, it's also another good way. And several countries just want to be sure that the product antibiotic will be used just based on some document, because just to avoid that a misuse of all the different antibiotics. So there is a lot of different initiative at the local level, but well, one of the key problems is just to be sure that this initiative will be well implemented in the different countries which we are targeting. Over.
Yeah, I do hope that sometimes we can have a new mechanism about how we're actually gonna deal with all those. So I heard that Mr. Stanley just joined us here, and so I'm just gonna give him a very brief introduction. So we're just talking about, so in some countries, people don't really need a prescription and they can just pick up antibiotics like in a local pharmacy. And so we're just trying to see if you have any recommendations about how we can regulate that one. So Mr. Stanley, you want to share a little bit about that? Okay, maybe we can come back with him later.
Maybe
so
on mute.
Yeah, I think he is muted. So okay, maybe we can, maybe Miss Michelle, you want to share it first?
Okay, so regarding the regulate the distribution of antibiotics, I want to give 3 main pieces of advice that have worked well for me during my own journey into how to be part of the solution of major global health challenge. First, get informed. Look for information and data about access to antimicrobials at a local as well as a global level. There are many sources you can look at, most of them freely available online. The idea here is you can be informed of how serious the problem is and how you can help to solve it. Second, get active. Try to connect with people with similar interests in the way we are doing right now. Don't be afraid of asking or connecting through different social media platforms with people trying to create innovative ways to improve antimicrobial accessibility. I advise you to participate actively and be part of the solution. Finally, enjoy your journey. Try to connect your personal interest and passion with the ways you can get involved in solutions for tackle down issues around access to antimicrobials. If you are a creative person and enjoy social media, use your skills to find new and better ways to disseminate important information. If you are good at research, please carry out applied research projects to improve antimicrobial accessibility. No matter if you are a pharmacist like myself, or an engineer, or an architect, we can always use our talent and skills for trying to build a better world. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your insight. I'm pretty sure we all here are so passionate about AMR, and we're just really happy that we're here. We can connect with each other and we can work on projects, or maybe just know more about how we can collaborate together to solve this problem. So I think Mr. Stanley's back. So Mr. Stanley, do you want to share a little bit about that?
Hello everyone, I'm Stanley. Sorry I turned in late. I just wanted to know where you guys are at the moment so that I can contribute something on the topic.
Yeah, so we're talking about how in some countries, people can just get their medications without prescription. So they can just go to like a local pharmacy and pick up antibiotics. So it's really hard to regulate the issue, and just want to know if you have any thoughts about that.
Oh yeah, that actually is a very big issue when it comes to antimicrobial use. And from my experience, looking at a case close to home here, just a neighboring country here, Tanzania, you find that community healthcare workers are not permitted to prescribe an antibiotic to treat pneumonia. So when you're talking about the whole thing about access, it actually becomes a problem because these patients have to travel over long distances to actually get a medical doctor who has the capacity to actually prescribe them antibiotic. So personnel is very, very important. And when you're talking about access, if we are able to build the capacity of the personnel and get them to have the necessary knowledge and skills to make informed decisions in terms of antimicrobial use. It's very, very important in actually improving access to antimicrobials.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sure like this is definitely needs a lot of interprofessional collaboration, because with only like maybe pharmacists or like doctors, it's really hard to just solve this whole big issue that we have right now. So there are like another questions for you all is that so if you guys can just share a little bit more about maybe your work that you have done to contribute to this issue. Maybe we can start with Mr. Yang.
Yes, so sorry, in terms of work we are doing to solve the issue of to fight drug-resistant infection. As I said previously, within GARDP, we are mainly a research and development organization. So our objective is really to develop some new product to find drug-resistant infection. And our objective is to target 5 new treatments by 25. We focus, of course, on pathogen defined by WHO as a public health priority. Sorry, Stanley, can you be on mute, please? Because there is a lot of back noise. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you so much. As I said, well, we are focusing on pathogen defined by WHO as a public health priority. So it's everything around carbapenem-resistant pathogen, Acinetobacter, Enterobacteriaceae, which are one of the main concerns in different parts of the world, but also on neglected population. And here it's children and neonate, for example, because well, there is not a lot of clinical trials linked to neonate or children population. So we just try to be sure that all the different new antibiotics will be also adapted for this population. So that's what we are doing, and I think I would say it's around maybe activity, but we need to be sure that to complete GARDP journey, that the product will be on the market. So it's all the question linked to the access and the stewardship. So that's why we are spending a lot of time on this one. To work with partners to ensure sustainable access to treatment, promoting responsible use, and of course, affordability in all in need. And last year, for example, we have organized a workshop around access and stewardship, moving from principle to practice. And if people are interested, the report of the workshop is on our website.
Wow, it's very exciting to learn about all the amazing work that is going on, and I would definitely check it out. So maybe next we can move on to Dr. Viviana.
Thank you. We work both at the global level and in trying to ensure that we're interacting with the regional, national, and local levels. So the way we do that is we participate directly in many of the discussions that are taking place in multilateral organizations. So from OIE as well as WHO, the UNGA with the high level panel that came out with the declaration in